There are books that entertain you. There are books that educate you. And then there are books that quietly change the way you look at your own life. Almost a century ago, a woman named Florence Scovel Shinn wrote a tiny book called The Game of Life and How to Play It. Published in 1925, the book was short, unusual, spiritual, and radically optimistic. It appeared long before the modern manifestation industry, long before The Secret, long before the explosion of the law of attraction, and decades before modern neuroscience began studying the relationship between attention, expectation, imagination, language, and behavior. Yet Shinn made a provocative claim: the way you think, speak, imagine, and respond to life can profoundly influence the life you experience. To some people, that's inspirational. To others, it's dangerous. Because if Shinn was even partly right, it means we may have more influence over our lives than we realize. And it also means we have to take a much closer look at the beliefs we carry every day. So what exactly did Florence Scovel Shinn believe? And why does this nearly century-old book still resonate today? Let's look at 5 of her most powerful ideas. Number 1. Life is a game governed by laws. Shinn begins with one of her most memorable ideas. Life is not a battle. It is a game. That sounds simple, but it completely changes the way you approach reality. If life is a battle, you spend your time fighting. You fight circumstances. You fight other people. You fight failure. You fight uncertainty. You believe that whoever works the hardest, pushes the hardest, and survives the longest wins. But Shinn suggested something different. She believed that life operates according to certain spiritual laws, and that suffering often comes from violating laws we don't understand. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" she encourages us to ask, "What am I failing to understand?" That's a fascinating shift. It turns life from a war into a system. And if life is a system, then perhaps the goal isn't simply to work harder. Perhaps the goal is to understand the rules. Shinn repeatedly tells stories in which an internal transformation comes before an external transformation. Someone releases resentment. Someone lets go of fear. Someone stops desperately trying to control everything. And then their circumstances begin to change. Her famous underlying principle is essentially consciousness comes first. Experience follows. Now, modern science obviously doesn't prove that thinking positively can magically rearrange the universe. That's an important distinction. But psychology does show that our expectations, attention, beliefs, and interpretations influence what we notice, how we behave, and how we respond to opportunities. If you believe the world is completely hostile, you'll behave differently than someone who believes opportunities are everywhere. 2 people can walk into the same room and experience 2 completely different psychological realities. That's where Shinn's idea becomes surprisingly relevant. Perhaps the game begins with learning to understand the player. And the player is you. Number 2. Your word is your wand. This may be Shinn's most famous idea. She believed that words are creative forces. She even wrote an entire book titled Your Word is Your Wand, and another called The Power of the Spoken Word. Her argument was straightforward. People constantly speak about themselves without realizing that they're reinforcing the identity they're trying to escape. I never have enough money. Nothing ever works out for me. I'm unlucky. I'm terrible at relationships. It's always difficult for me. I'll probably fail. Shinn believed that statements like these aren't harmless. They reveal and reinforce the beliefs underneath them. And here's where the idea becomes interesting from a modern psychological perspective. Your words don't simply communicate your beliefs to other people. They also communicate them to you. The stories you repeatedly tell about yourself can influence how you interpret new experiences. Say someone repeatedly tells themselves, "I'm terrible at meeting people." They may enter social situations expecting rejection. They might speak less, avoid eye contact, leave conversations early, interpret an ordinary interaction as evidence that nobody likes them. And then they return home thinking, "See, I told you I'm terrible at this." The belief influences the behavior. The behavior influences the outcome. The outcome reinforces the belief. And suddenly the original statement appears to have been proven true. This doesn't mean words are magic spells. It means words can become part of a psychological feedback loop. That's why one of the easiest ways to become more aware of your thinking is to listen to yourself. For the next 24 hours, pay attention to what you say about yourself. How often do you say, "I can't. I don't have time. I'm not good enough. It's impossible. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm always unlucky." You might be surprised. Shinn's solution wasn't to pretend problems don't exist. It was to stop constantly rehearsing the reality you don't want. Your words reveal where your mind is living, and changing the words can be the first step toward changing the story. Number 3. Non-resistance is the key to creation. This is perhaps Shinn's most counterintuitive teaching. She argued that resistance can strengthen the very thing you're trying to escape. Think about it. You hate a situation. You think about it constantly. You complain about it. You become angry about it. You replay what someone did to you. You imagine everything that could go wrong. And although you're trying to eliminate the problem, you're giving it enormous amounts of mental attention. Shinn believed that this emotional resistance keeps consciousness attached to the unwanted condition. Fear keeps fear alive. Resentment keeps the past alive. Conflict can perpetuate conflict. Her answer was non-resistance. But non-resistance doesn't mean doing nothing. It doesn't mean becoming passive. And it certainly doesn't mean accepting abuse or refusing to solve real problems. It means refusing to allow fear, desperation, resentment, or obsession to control your internal state. There's a huge difference between saying, "This problem doesn't exist," and saying, "This problem exists, but it doesn't control me." That's a much more powerful position. Shinn believed that when you release your obsession with controlling exactly how something must happen, you create space for solutions you couldn't see before. And this connects with a phenomenon psychologists and neuroscientists have explored in different ways. When our minds become excessively focused on threat, we can narrow our attention and miss alternative possibilities. Sometimes the solution doesn't appear because there are no solutions. Sometimes we simply can't see them while we're trapped inside the problem. Shinn's philosophy could therefore be summarized as, stop feeding the reality you don't want with all of your attention. Want something. Work toward it. But don't become psychologically imprisoned by its absence. Number 4. Imagination precedes manifestation. Shinn repeatedly taught that the unseen precedes the seen. Before something exists physically, she believed it must first exist as an idea, a vision, or an intention. She encouraged people to mentally occupy the fulfilled state, to imagine themselves as the person who has already achieved what they desire. In modern language, you might call this visualizing your future self. And this is another place where her ideas intersect with modern research. Mental rehearsal has been studied extensively in sports and performance. Athletes sometimes visualize specific movements before performing them. Musicians can mentally rehearse passages. Public speakers rehearse presentations in their heads. Visualization doesn't eliminate the need for practice, but mental rehearsal can prepare the brain for action. That's an important distinction. Shinn wasn't simply saying, close your eyes, wish for a mansion, and wait. Her deeper message was that your internal picture influences the way you prepare for the external reality. Consider the difference between these two people. Person A says, I hope someday I become successful. Person B begins asking, what would the successful version of me do today? How would that person spend their time? What would they learn? What would they stop doing? Who would they need to become? That changes imagination from fantasy into preparation. Shinn called this living in anticipation. You begin behaving in alignment with the future you believe is possible. And that brings us to one of her most powerful ideas. Number 5, faith is acceptance. For Shinn, faith wasn't simply religious belief. She described faith in a much more practical way. Faith is what you accept as true. Think about that. If you have complete faith in scarcity, you will organize your life around scarcity. If you have complete faith in failure, you'll constantly look for evidence that failure is coming. If you have faith that improvement is possible, you'll behave differently. Faith, in this sense, becomes an expectation, and expectations influence behavior. Shinn illustrated this idea through one of the Bible's most memorable stories. In the Book of Kings, 3 kings and their armies find themselves stranded in the desert without enough water. They seek guidance from the prophet Elisha, and the instruction they receive is strange: dig ditches. There is no rain, no visible source of water, no obvious reason to believe the valley will suddenly fill. Yet they dig. They prepare for water before they can see water. And according to the biblical story, water eventually fills the valley. For Shinn, This was a perfect metaphor for faith. Most people want evidence before they act. They want to see the rain before they dig the ditch. They want the job before they prepare for it. They want the money before they make plans. They want certainty before they take the first step. Shinn reverses the order. Prepare first. Act first. Dig the ditch. The metaphor works even without accepting the supernatural interpretation. If you want a new career, prepare your resume before the opportunity appears. If you want to travel, get the passport. If you want to become a writer, start writing. If you want to become healthier, start behaving like someone who values their health. If you want to build a business, start learning the skills before the business is successful. You're creating a structure capable of receiving the thing you're pursuing. That's the practical meaning of digging your ditches. So, was Florence Scovel Shinn right? This is where things get complicated. Shinn's work belongs to the New Thought tradition, a spiritual movement that became influential in the United States during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Her ideas were deeply influenced by Christianity, metaphysics, and the belief that consciousness plays a fundamental role in human experience. Some of her claims go far beyond what modern science can establish. There is no scientific evidence that simply thinking about something causes the universe to rearrange itself to deliver it. And that's important to say. But rejecting literal manifestation doesn't mean every idea in Shinn's philosophy is meaningless. Quite the opposite. Modern psychology gives us plenty of reasons to take seriously the relationship between belief, attention, language, expectation, imagination, and behavior. Your beliefs influence what you notice. What you notice influences what you focus on. What you focus on influences your decisions. Your decisions influence your behavior. Your behavior influences your results. And your results can reinforce your original beliefs. That's a feedback loop. Shinn described it using spiritual language nearly a century ago. Modern psychology often describes similar processes using very different terminology. But the central question remains fascinating. How much of the reality we experience is shaped by the way we approach it? Maybe that's why the game of life and how to play it has survived for so long. Not because every claim in the book has been scientifically proven, but because Shinn understood something timeless. The way you interpret your life becomes part of the life you live. Your words matter. Your expectations matter. Your attention matters. Your imagination matters. And the meaning you assign to your circumstances matters. Perhaps the most dangerous idea in Shinn's book isn't that you can magically manifest anything you want. It's something more unsettling. You may be participating in the creation of your reality without even realizing it. Every day, you're rehearsing a story about yourself, about other people, about money, about love, about failure, about success, about what is possible. And eventually, you begin living according to that story. So perhaps Shinn's challenge isn't think positively. It's much deeper. Learn the rules of the game. Watch your words. Question your assumptions. Stop feeding what you don't want. Imagine the person you want to become. Prepare before the evidence arrives. And then act accordingly. Because whether you interpret her ideas spiritually, psychologically, or simply as a philosophy of personal responsibility, one question remains. What if the first thing you need to change isn't your circumstances, but the way you're playing the game? And that may be the real reason this tiny book has survived for nearly a century. The game is still being played. The rules are still being debated. And you're already on the field. If you watched all the way to the end, like the video and subscribe for more fascinating ideas about books, psychology, history, and the hidden forces that shape the way we see reality.